So I was asked to make a frog cake, for it to be girly, but definitely have frogs for this little Hope, who absolutely adores frogs. I couldn't have asked for a better theme, so I thought I'd film the making of it and share it with all of you. So I hope you like it, and I hope you like the happy little frogs. I will be showing you how to make all the decorations to go on this, including the handmade name. I use Saracino Modelling Paste for my characters. This green that I've made, I used Party Green by Sugar Flare mixed with a little bit of Melon by Sugar Flare to get this lovely bright green color that goes so lovely with pinks. I rolled it into a bit of a cone shape and then trimmed off the top for the head to sit flush on the body. Just indent the sides a little bit, and this is where the legs will fit nicely into the side of your character. To make the legs, roll out a sausage shape with a little bit of a point each side. Bend it over for a bent frog's leg and just check how it fits on the side of your frog. On the knee part, I did pinch it a little bit to give it more of a pointy shape to look like a knee. I trimmed off the part where I'm actually going to fit the foot on the end. It's just easier for me to fit it onto a flatter end rather than have a pointy end. Now you can use some sugar glue to attach it. I didn't need to because my modeling paste was still quite sticky and warm. Add a second leg the other side, and now I'm going to show you how to make the feet. I roll a small little teardrop shape and then I press it a bit flatter. You don't want it too flat, and just on the front of it, make it a little bit straighter. Use a sharp craft knife just to cut a little line in the middle, cut all the way through, and cut a little line each side. This is so you've got 4 little toes on the end of the foot. Just gently separate them and round them off nicely so that they look like little toes. You will add little balls on the end to give that frog effect. So just gently separate and just check where you're going to fit it. I just used a ball tool to press down into it so that the end of the leg fitted nicely in here. You can add some glue to stick this on properly. Once you have the foot the size and the shape that you like it, get a smaller ball tool and just indent on the end of each toe so that you'll finish it off with little balls on the end. So I rolled 4 little balls out here and I'm just adding them to the ends of the toes. You want them to be a little bit bigger than the ends of the toes so that you really can see them, and it really gives you that little frog foot effect. Now I actually found it easier to place my frog on a little piece of parchment paper. It was just easier for me to move the frog around without anything falling off while I was working on it. So if you roll a long sausage shape for the arms in the middle of the frog, gently pick up your character and use a bit of sugar glue on the front of your frog to add the front legs. Now, when I made my second frog, I actually found it easier to do these legs first with the feet and then add the side legs with the feet. It gave me enough space to be able to make the feet in the middle and then work on the sides. So try that if you are making one. I add some support in my frog to hold the head on top of the body. I just use a piece of dry spaghetti because it is edible and it was for a kid's party, so I prefer to use dried spaghetti, but you can use a cocktail stick. Now roll out a head shape. I made it quite oval because I wanted it to be quite big and oval on top of the body. Set it in place. I did use a little bit of sugar glue to hold it in place. I'm using a ball tool to indent where I'm actually going to put the eyes, not quite on top of the head, but almost at top at the front of the head, and this is where I'll fit the eyes in. So I wanted big happy frogs, and I'm using a Sweet Elite arc tool here. It is the larger one to add a very smiley face. And then I'm using the end of my Dresden tool, the scoop end, to add some little dimples on the side of the mouth just for a little bit of extra character, so it really looks like he's giving a lovely big grin. I have 2 balls ready here to make the eyes, and I'm just making them a little bit hollow inside. So this will be the outside of the eye and I will fit the white inside. I do this on the palm of my hand just because I find it easier and I find it does move around better in the palm of my hand. Just check for size when you actually place it on top of the head, and then go ahead and do your next one that you're ready to do. When you're happy with the shape of the actual eyelids, add a little bit of glue into the dents and put your eye in here and just use the ball tool to press it down and into the head and smooth it off before you add the white. Just gently pick up and press it in again with the ball tool. Use the same size ball tool that you used to actually create the little eye socket. And gently press them in so that they're going to stay there and they're not going to fall off. Now roll 2 balls of white modeling paste and place them in. Again, you want to just check for size. You want it to fit into the eye socket. You don't want it bulging out too much. And I just literally just press them in gently with my fingers so that you've got the lovely green outside and it's standing out just a little bit. Now I'm using a smaller ball tool to make a hole where I'm actually going to fit the center of the eye in. So just gently press in. Try not to push too hard and misshape everything. And then you're going to roll 2 little black balls, push them into the white and flatten them as much as possible into the white. You don't want them standing out from the white. Just use your fingers or a ball tool to push them down into the white of the eyes. So I want to add a little bit of a glint in his eyes, and I'm just using another small ball tool to press into the black to make a little hole, and then I'm using a really tiny little pieces of white. I always add a little bit of glue into the hole, pick up the tiny piece with my paintbrush and pop it into the eye and then push it flat. This just gives them a little bit of extra character in the eyes and makes it almost look like they're shining. So I wanted to give my character some little pink cheeks. I'm using a medium-sized ball tool here to press gently into his cheeks. And then I'm going to roll some pink modeling paste into little balls, push it into these holes and flatten nicely on his face so that it looks like rosy cheeks. You can, of course, just use an edible petal dust at the end to dust the cheeks. So I wanted to add just a few little light green spots onto the frog for some extra detail. All I did was I made a slightly lighter green from the green that I had and mixed with white. I rolled them into small balls and I'm just pressing it against my character and just flattening it as I did with the eyes and things. You can either flatten just with your finger or just use the ball tool to flatten it against the character. You can again use some sugar glue. I didn't need to because my paste was quite sticky. I added some to the legs and to the body and the back of the head. So now I'm just going to add little nostrils between his eyes with a very small ball tool. So I made a second frog for the cake and I did a big smile on this frog too. I set the smile slightly to the side of the face because I was placing the head at a bit of an angle. Now I'm using the scoop side of my Dresden tool to just open the mouth a little bit to give it a bit more character. And then what I did was I got a little bit of black modeling paste, rolled it and so it was nice and soft, and then popped it into the mouth with a little bit of sugar glue, popped that into the mouth and flattened it in the mouth so it looked like he had an open mouth and a big smile on his face. And just gently use your tool to push this in. Again, you don't want too much, you don't want it coming out the mouth, you just want to give the illusion of an open mouth on the character. And there you go. Another very happy little frog to add to the cake. Now to make a lily pad for your cake, make it according to the size of your cake. I cut out a 4-inch disc of green icing here, and again I'm working on a piece of parchment paper so that I can move this around easily without constantly having to pick it up. I'm just using a Dresden tool to mark the lines of the lily pad just for a little bit of extra detail instead of just putting a plain piece of paste on top of the cake. And this is what I want my frog to sit on top of the cake. You can make some smaller ones obviously for the board or for around the cake or layer some on top of the cake, but I just decided to do one with the big frog on top. Now you can't have a giant lily pad without some water lilies on it. So I have cut out some flowers here. I used a PME daisy cutter and I used the medium sized one. It is just Saracino Modelling Paste I'm using here, and it's lovely. It curls in nicely, and as you can see I'm just using a ball tool on a flower foam pad, and all I'm doing is going from the end of the petal and bringing my ball tool down in towards the middle of my petal. I do it pretty quickly because I find if you do it quickly it flicks up nicely and it pulls this beautifully in so that it's closing the flower. I did cut 4 out but realized when I was actually putting it together that I didn't actually need 4. I only needed to layer 3 together. I think if you're doing a bigger flower then you could possibly do 4 or 5 layers. You wouldn't need to only do 3. I just add a bit of sugar glue into the first one and then gently place the next flower on top of that. Press down gently and a little bit more sugar glue, and add the third flower in the top to create the lily itself. And I also place the petals so that they're not overlapping each other exactly, they're kind of going over the gaps. And then I use a ball tool to press into the middle to close that center piece a little bit. Now I'm using an even smaller daisy cutter, and I've cut out some yellow pieces, and all I'm doing is folding them over and pinching them at the back, and then I'm going to gather them together to make a center for my lily. I tried a few different things, but I found this was actually the easiest way to get that yellow center of the lily. So as the icing is still quite soft and still quite warm, I'm just gently pressing together at the back, and it's sticking together naturally at the back without me having to add too much glue or anything like that. So do work quite quickly, and I also rolled them fairly thin so you get quite a lovely little piece to go in the middle. Cut off the back end so you don't have a pointy piece at the back. Add a little bit of glue into the center of your lily and gently press this in. Now I did use a tool to press this down into the middle of my lily just to make sure it was stuck properly, and I made a good few of these to go on the lily pad and on the board of the cake. And there you go, you've got a little water lily, very easy. So I wanted to add some bulrushes to the side of the cake, just to add something along the side. I didn't want just this big open blue space, so I rolled some green paste, the same green that I made the lily pad from, and I rolled it really thin and cut into different size strips. I stuck these onto the cake first, and then I rolled the brown part for the top. You just roll a thicker sausage shape for the brown part, make sure it's rounded each end, and then I pressed this onto the top of the stem on the sides of the cake. So I made these actually directly on the cake, but I just wanted to show you how I put them together without it rolling all over the place, of course. I had complete free reign with this cake, and as it was just a girly cake, and my customer was amazing and just said, I want frogs and I want it to be girly, so have fun. I decided to add a couple of toadstools too, because for me girly means toadstools. So I always roll the stems for my toadstools out, and I set them aside for about half an hour to an hour just so that they can firm up nicely in shape, and then I add the tops to them a little bit later so that I know that it stands up straight and it holds the top of the toadstool. So I roll them in different shapes and sizes, and I always push them down slightly on my mat so that they're a little bit flatter underneath, so when you do add it to the cake it actually stands nicely on the cake. Now set those aside, and then you can make the tops of your toadstools. Again, you don't want to make these too big that the minute you add them to the stalks they just fall over. So I roll out a shape, and I just shape these mostly in my hands. They don't have to be any sort of uniform shape or size, because let's face it, toadstools are all different anyway. So just I always flatten on the edges just a little bit and flare it out. So if I do want to add it to the stalk and flare it up a little bit so it looks like it's kind of wavy, that's also doable. You can obviously roll these to a point and fold the point over. You can honestly do whatever you like with the toadstool tops. There's no set way to do these. I just love adding toadstools to cakes, especially girly cakes. I think it just finishes them off perfectly. Now to add some dots to the top of my toadstools, I'm just rolling little balls, pressing them flat, just like we did with the spots on the frog. This is obviously quite a time-consuming way to do it, but it is a doable way if you don't have any white paste color. If you have got some white paste color, I do have Sugar Flare white extra paste color. You can just use a ball tool, dip it into the white, and then dip it on top of the toadstools. A lot less time and just as effective. I do mostly do that on my cakes, but I wanted to show this version just in case you don't actually have any white paste. It's an easy version too, and it still works, and it's just as effective. Now to put your toadstools together, I get the top and I turn it over in my hand and use a cone tool to make a little groove in there, and this is so that you can fit the stalk into this. I do add a bit of sugar glue so that it sticks nicely, and I do find it easier to add the stalk into the top rather than adding the top onto the stalk. You can see kind of where the stalk is going and that it is fitting properly into the top of your toadstool. And just adjust as you go, and you will see sometimes you might pick up a stalk that doesn't quite fit the top. Just find the best fitting one. making bras for around the side of the cake, I just roll some long teardrop shapes and just stick them together. They should stick naturally together as you're working, as it is quite warm and sticky anyway. Make little batches up instead of one long one. Just gently stick together, trim along the bottom and add to the cake. Now I wanted to add a little bit of a handwritten font onto my cake. So I had to do this 100% by hand and not with any stencils. So I found a font I liked online and I typed up her name and printed it out. Then I've covered this with a piece of parchment paper so that I can work on top of the parchment paper and the icing doesn't stick to the actual paper that I printed out. All you do is you literally just shape the name on top of the name. It's not perfect, and you will see that some of my pieces are a little bit thicker than the name itself, but you get the basic gist of what you're supposed to do and how to get the actual shape of the name. So I started obviously with the H, and you can see I do it in 3 different sections. So I start with the little crossbar on the H. That's the only thing I can think to call it. And I gently build it up and trim where I need to, so it looks like it's a little sort of a flick on the end of the H going onto the O. Then for the O, I'm going to roll out a long sort of sausage shape and start with a bit chunkier, and then gently it goes thinner and thinner so that it can go around the O and up to the P. Again, trim off. I do each letter separately. It's a lot easier to do them separately, and then I leave these to dry for a good few hours before I try and add it to the cake, because I don't want to misshape it once I've done it, but I add them individually to the cake and put them back together on the cake. So just gently a little bit of glue as I need it, and again go on to the next letter and finish with the E and just set aside until you're ready to add it to your cake. Nice and easy, and it's an effective way to add a different kind of font to your creations. I hope you've enjoyed watching this little tutorial on this cake. I thoroughly enjoyed making the cake and the video for it too. I'd love to know what you think about it, and also what else you'd like to see in my video tutorials, as I am doing more and I'd like to do more of what people would like to see. Here's the finished cake, and I thoroughly enjoyed making this fun, cute little frog cake for Hope.